In this next lesson, we will discuss supply and demand. The entire marketplace and all of business around the world basically runs on supply and demand. Today we're going to look at the supply and demand principles. To start off, supply is the amount of goods and services that are available to buy at any one time around the world. The demand is the amount of goods or services that consumers are willing to buy at that same time. We will be looking at supply and demand in detail, but we will be using the supply and demand curve throughout this lesson. Take a look at the curve in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. P equals price of the product or service, Q equals the quantity of the product or service, and equilibrium is when the people want to buy the exact amount of supply that is available. This basically never happens, but this is what the marketplace is always trying to achieve, equilibrium, where the demand and supply equal each other. Demand. If you look down in the corner there on the right, I've highlighted the demand and the demand curve in yellow. The quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a specific price is considered the quantity demanded. Every consumer has different demands. As the price of a good or service increases, the demand for that good or service will drop as people aren't willing to pay an increased price for it. The opposite is true. If the price decreases, the demand for it will increase as people are more willing to purchase that item or service. Supply. Supply is the quantity of a good or service that businesses are willing and able to provide within a range of prices that people are willing to pay. If you look down in the right corner at the curve, I've highlighted where the supply curve is. It is the blue line. As the price increases, suppliers are more willing to offer more products and services. So basically what that means is, as people are willing to pay more, more suppliers are willing to get into the game and make the product or service. Price. When we're talking about the supply and demand curve, the price is determined by many factors, including supply and demand. Prices tend to fluctuate because demand and supply are constantly changing. Every second of every day, the supply and demand of a product or service is changing. Price is also influenced by the cost of producing the good or service. Everything that it takes to make a product or service is included in the price. Competition also influences price. If there are more producers of a product, then the price will decrease because more people will have to sell their items and people can demand a lower price. The Q in the supply and demand curve is for quantity. So, the quantity is determined by many factors including supply and demand. The quantity fluctuates because supply and demand are always changing, just like in the last slide we looked at how prices fluctuate because of the same reason. The quantity produced is also influenced by the cost of producing the good or service. Everything that it takes to make a product or service influences how many can be made or offered. External factors influence quantity produced that sometimes cannot be helped, like natural disasters, weather, equipment failures, and supply shortages. All of these things affect the quantity that can be produced and the quantity that is demanded by consumers. Equilibrium. Equilibrium is the ideal state for the supply and demand of all products in all industries. It occurs when the amount of a product that is available is the exact amount that people want to buy. This rarely happens, if at all, in any industry, but is what companies strive to achieve. That way there is no shortage or surplus of goods or services, which we will look at in the next few slides. An example would be if on Saturday, July 23rd, people wanted to purchase 1,000 hamburgers around the city of Toronto, and exactly 1,000 hamburgers were made in all restaurants that produced hamburgers. As you can see, this is very, very rare. Businesses do always want an equilibrium. The reason is they do not want to have a surplus or a shortage of products and services. If you take a look down at the chart in the right corner, a surplus occurs when there is more supply than demand. When this happens, prices drop because people will be able to purchase the supply in many places, so businesses have to be competitive and lure people with lower prices. When they have so many options, they could go anywhere and purchase the products or services. Shortage occurs when there is more demand than supply. When this happens, the prices increase because people will be willing to pay more for a product so they don't go without. When there's less people selling these items, they can increase the price because they know people will be buying them anyway, and that way they're making more money on each product and service sold. Let's look at some examples of supply and demand. By looking at these scenarios, it will help you to understand the supply and demand, and make sure that if you have any questions, you reach out to me via email. So, the scenario: a frost has ruined the crops of 2 major apple orchards in Ontario. What will happen? Quantity supplied will go down. Since the crops are ruined, that means less apples will be available throughout the province of Ontario. That being the case, the price of the apples that are available will increase as people will be willing to pay more for apples knowing that there aren't many available. So the people that still have apples for sale will catch on to it and know that if they do raise the price, people will still buy the apples. The second scenario: Christmas is over. Christmas decorations and gifts are no longer needed, so the quantity demanded of Christmas items will go down, so that prices on these items will also fall, as people will still buy them for next year, but won't be willing to pay full price because they don't need them. Also, companies will want to get rid of these Christmas decorations to make space for all of their new items, so again, the prices will go down to clear them out, as people will be willing to buy more when it's at a lower price. The third example: a new manufacturer of hockey sticks set up shop in London. The quantity of sticks available in London, Ontario will go up, so prices will fall, as everybody in the stick market in London will have to be competitive. The last one: the new iPhone 7 has come out. What happens with supply and demand? The demand for the new iPhone 7 will increase, as people usually want the newest and best phone. Prices will be high, as supply at first will be very limited. The demand for iPhone 6 and other phones will go down, so that producers will decrease the price to sell those and make space for more iPhone 7s. So as you can see, no matter what scenario, it affects the supply and demand of each item in each industry based on everyday occurrences. Understanding these scenarios will help you with supply and demand going forward. And that's the end of this lesson presentation. Now go through the rest of the lesson to learn more in detail about supply and demand.